Level up your LA Kings experience with Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access and rewards. Enjoy great seats to the game in Section 103 along with Yamava Club access and parking included with your purchase. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings shop item at the game. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn perks on each purchase from the only leading ticket company with a rewards program. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings. Do you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back to another episode of All the Kings Men. My name is Jesse Cohen. Joining me today, John Kelly. How are you doing today, John?
Jesse, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So the reason we wanted to talk to you is it's your first year now done as play-by-play voice of the LA Kings. A year under your belt, how do you do you feel like a member of the LA Kings?
Oh, for sure. Everybody with the organization, starting with Luke Robitaille and Mike Altieri and Ken Holland, the coaches have been so nice to me, so respectful. They made me feel right at home right from the time I got there in mid-September. And professionally, working with Jim Fox and some of the other analysts I work for, and of course, our producer Hoover and our directors, they made it really easy for me. And the whole staff has been wonderful. And I don't have one single complaint about my time in LA last season. And I can't wait for next season to start.
So I don't know if I've said this directly to you, but I know I've said it to other people about you. One of the things that really, really impressed me right away, I don't remember what day you got hired or what it was announced, but the first activity that there was on the practice rink in El Segundo, you were there. I can't remember if it was rookie camp or training camp, or I don't think it was dev camp. I think that would have been too early in the summer, but you were there, you're at all the practices in the morning skates. And I try to explain to people sometimes that 99% of a job in this industry is preparation, right? Because you never know when a panel of glass is going to break or a fight's going to break out or overtime or somehow, the game takes longer than you think it is, or you have an opportunity to talk to somebody about something and you need to know what you're talking about. And all of that is prep work. And so the fact that you showed up immediately with a notebook in hand, ready to learn, and I think it was like the first or second day of training camp, and you were asking who all the prospects were and what their trajectories were and what their ceilings were. And I was just really, really impressed. So, for anybody who isn't able to know that about you, I always really appreciated it.
Well, thanks, Jesse. I feel that's my job. And it's not just calling the game or going to the game. It's learning about the players and what the coaches are thinking and getting background information, because you can never have too much information and you never know when you're going to use it. I'll give you a great example, Jesse. As a matter of fact, you mentioned the glass breaking. About a week before the Kings started their playoffs against the Avalanche, I just happened to be in the locker room talking to a couple of the equipment guys, including Darren. And I was just asking him about, the skates the players use today, the pop-out blades. I said, how do you sharpen them and what's the process like? And he told me the process. It's done on an automated machine, and they take 12 sets of blades on every road trip, and they have a full set for every player on the bench. So if a blade pops out, it takes literally 5 seconds. So I had that information, and I didn't think I was going to use it. Well, lo and behold, in game 1 or 2, I can't remember. I think game 2 when the glass broke behind DJ? I think it was game 2.
It was in Colorado, right? Yeah.
Right. So we had about a 15 or 20-minute delay, and, Jim and I are talking about the game and whatever, And I said to Hoover, our producer on Talkback, I said, show me the equipment guys. And I told the story. And, it wasn't earth shattering and it didn't change anyone's life, but it was good fill and it was good information. So that's just a small example. If you talk to people, if you're around, if you're curious, you get information and you just never know when you're going to use it.
Well, and wasn't it Warren Fogle this season who had a blade pop out of his skate and had to be towed or pushed back to the bench? I mean, it's good. So you completed this full season, and I hope I'm not pulling the curtain back too far, but you signed with the Kings late in the summer, as I recall.
Correct.
And you had occasion to schedule some dates in your personal life that conflicted with the Kings schedule. So there were some games this past season that you missed. Should we expect to see you with a fuller schedule this season or closer to last season?
No, Jesse, that was the agreement that I agreed to with the Kings. Was I'm scheduled this last year or I was scheduled and again this coming season to do 60 regular season games, 2 preseason games, and the playoffs. So Josh Schaefer, who, as we know, does a fantastic job as the play-by-play announcer on radio, and then when I don't do TV, he does TV. So we're going up to 84 games next year, as you know.
Yeah.
So Josh would get some more games. So no, I'm expecting to do 60 regular season games next year.
You're right. So for those who don't know, the NHL regular season schedule is changing from 82 games to 84 games. When the schedule isn't available to you, years in advance, right? Like, I don't know when next year's schedule will be released, but it usually is sort of the middle of June or July. Do you just work on a number and then work on the dates later when the schedule comes out and you sort of match it against your personal schedule? How are those decisions made?
Well, quite honestly, I did not pick my schedule. I mean, you were referencing a personal situation, and I did have one last year. My nephew got married in Orlando, Florida last New Year's Eve. So the Kings, as you know, had some home games right after Christmas before the new year. So I went to Mike Altieri and the Kings and said, I would like these games off because my family is going to go to the wedding. We have 3 kids. So we basically spent Christmas and into the new year in Orlando. So I do have one wedding in October. My daughter's best friend is getting married and we've been invited. So I haven't broached that subject yet. But, I think that the Kings have been very accommodating to me. So if I go to them when the schedule comes out in July and say, I would like this weekend off, there's no reason they wouldn't give it to me. So, but by and large, the schedule was put together by Michael Terry and Jared. And, it made sense for everybody. A lot of the games that Josh did, the road games, they would, maybe it was a 2-game road trip. Well, it doesn't make any sense to send me on a 2-game road trip and only do 1 game.
Right.
I'm sitting around not working or I want to fly home, whatever. So, they made logical decisions and it worked out great for everybody.
As a broadcaster, is there a significant difference in prepping for an 82-game season versus an 84-game season?
No, I wish the season was. Yeah. I wish the season was 120 games. I love hockey. Ideally, I'd like 1 month off, Jesse.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. The older I get, I enjoy my time off. My wife and I are in Palm Springs this month, and we're doing a lot of hiking and swimming and stuff like that. So I enjoy my time off, but I'm a hockey addict, Jesse. I love watching hockey when I'm not broadcasting. I watch almost every single playoff game. So, it doesn't matter to me if the Kings play 82 games or 84 or 120. Now, I know that's ridiculous, but the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned.
Well, then I have to ask you, because I found myself watching something that I've never actually watched before. Have you watched any of the Memorial Cup yet?
I have not.
It's free online if you want to watch.
Okay.
Of the TSN feed.
Yeah, the Kings have a couple of players in the Memorial Cup, correct?
Yeah, Chihash and Woolley. And I watched the first game of the Memorial Cup was Kitchener versus Kelowna, and they were playing each other. So I tuned in and watched it. So there's no difference in prep, but an 82 or an 84 game season, one of the one of the conditions of that is a shorter preseason, which changes the dynamics of a training camp. You talked about coming in and how everybody made you feel comfortable, but in your first year, the Kings changed coaches. You have the departure of Anze Kopitar now in retirement. Like, there were trades. The team that we're going to see going into training camp is far different from the team we saw going into training camp last year. Is that a curveball thrown at you going into year 2 of your Kings tenure?
Well, quite honestly, not really. We don't know, number one, who the coach is going to be. I know that Ken Holland addressed that the other day on a podcast, and DJ certainly is very much in the mix. And I thought he did a tremendous job, and he's so easy to work for. And the Kings, as you know, Jesse, made a few changes during the regular season. The biggest add, of course, was Panera. And so, last year wasn't a lot of work, because I don't consider going to the rink and watching practice and talking to players work. I really don't. But I'd say the legwork last year for me was to just get to know the players and for the players to know who I am, instead of some random guy coming up and asking them a question about the team. So I'll know 90 or 95% of the players next fall, barring a lot of trades or signings. You just never know. Right. But I think it'll be easier from that respect going into training camp next year, that I'll be familiar with the players and they'll be familiar with me. So it'll be a easier training camp in a way for me.
You know as well as anybody what a resource Jim Fox is. And I like to think I know the game pretty well, but there are all sorts of things where I realize as I'm watching a game or as I'm watching practice, boy, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just sort of reading and reacting to, I can see a good play when it happens, but I can't necessarily pick up a shift in a defensive strategy in the middle of a game. Or there are tons of times during a practice where I'll lean over to Jim and go, what is the point of this drill? Like, what are we working on here? Like, I can see what's happening, but I can't read the situation. As a play-by-play announcer, are you even looking to identify defensive sets or offensive, strategic changes, or are you just leaning on whoever your analyst is on any given night for that sort of thing?
Yeah, I tend to lean on the analyst, and in this case, of course, Jim, who does an outstanding job for the X's and O's. But, Jesse, I played hockey until I was 20 years old. I've been announcing pro hockey since 1983. So I tend, as a play-by-play announcer, I think I have a good feel for the game when I'm calling the game. If a team is hemmed in their own zone and they're not making crisp passes and they're getting bogged down in their own zone, I might make a statement like, "Hey, Jim, the Kings aren't getting the puck out here," and he'll explain why. Or conversely, maybe the Kings are having their way in the offensive zone. Or maybe there were a lot of turnovers at center ice or the offensive blue line. So a lot of things are quite apparent to me. But as far as the really, deep X's and O's analysis and what's happening in the game as far as neutral zone forecheck or how a team's setting up with their offensive forecheck, things like that, I leave that really to Jim, and I just try to get a big picture of what's happening in the game and comment on it, and obviously have Jim comment on that as well.
The reason I ask, the thought process is for years under Todd McClellan and then Jim Hiller, the Kings sort of famously played the 1-3-1, which is visually really easy to identify, right?
Correct.
You just look for three guys in a row across the neutral zone, one guy back and one guy forechecking, and you can see it even when they're not playing it regularly. You can see them fall it, and not just the Kings, any team. When a team falls into a 1-3-1 formation, you can just see it. It's visually obvious. But last summer, there was conversation about, okay, maybe it's time to abandon the 1-3-1 for a more aggressive style. And so they talked about, I can't remember if it was a 2-2-1 or a 1-2-2. But either way, there was talk about shifting the neutral zone set and pushing for a more aggressive forecheck out of the neutral zone. And I got to tell you, John, I don't know what it looks like. I couldn't. Yeah, right. I know they did it. I know I saw the 1-3-1 less, but I didn't know what I was looking for. And so when they switched from Jim Hiller to DJ Smith mid-season, I could tell that the hitting went up, because that's obviously something you can see. You can go like, okay, and, yes, there are more body checks. Their forecheck is more aggressive, and obviously the goals went up, and so that's something you can see. But I rely on Jim almost 100% to tell me, are they still playing man-to-man D in their own zone? Is that still the identity of the team? Like, I don't have a feel for any of that at all. And it never even occurred to me before whether or not a play-by-play announcer would need to be fluent in that kind of level of detail.
Yeah, I don't think that a play-by-play announcer has to be fluent in that. It's very rare that I would go to a coach on an off day and say, what kind of forecheck are you going to use tonight against, team A, or what's your neutral zone going to be like? I leave that to Jim, but I will say, when they did make the coaching change to DJ, they were certainly much more aggressive on the forecheck. And to me, in the neutral zone, they were also more aggressive. And when they forced a turnover, perhaps at their own blue line, they really pushed, and their defense really jumped up. And they knew they needed more offense in general, and they needed more offense from their blue line. I mean, only Brent Clark really was a force offensively from the back end. He had 8 goals and 40 points. So I think they felt that they needed more offense from their D, and the defense, to me, really jumped up a lot more once they made the coaching change. And offensively, they were much more, as you said, physical and attacking the puck and trying to force turnovers. That's what I saw.
Off the top of your head, do you know how many different head coaches you have been the play-by-play announcer for over your different?
Off the top, the answer is, I've been in the NHL luckily for 37 years. St. Louis, Tampa, Colorado, St. Louis again, and now with the Kings. So I don't know. I'd have to add it up. I could figure it out real quick if you want to pause this show and come back at me in 10 minutes. Okay. But I would say roughly at least 20 that I've worked with. That's just the ballpark.
The reason I ask, and I'm not sure that people know this, so the broadcast staff is granted an extra audience with the coaching staff before games. And I don't know actually how long it is, but I suspect it's probably between 5 and 20 minutes.
Well, actually, we don't really exercise that option very often, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. I'd say maybe once every 2 weeks we'll pull Jim aside, or Jim first and then DJ, right. and we'll talk to the coach privately. And I think we get a little more insight than what the coach will give the regular media at the podium. So that happens, like I said, every couple of weeks, a little bit more in the playoffs, and it would be only 5 or 10 minutes. So it just gives us a little more insight into what the coach is thinking. He'll tell us things off the record, things like that. So yeah, it probably happens every couple of weeks.
The reason I ask is I just wondered, like, one of the things I found. I found it amusing. I guess I don't mind saying amusing, is that Jim Hiller, there's some coaches will, I use this word and I don't mean it to be the way that I think it'll be heard. Some coaches are comfortable just lying. Or not lying, but they'll say, we don't know, where they very clearly do know, but they just don't want to tell you. So they'll just say, we don't know. One of my favorite things about Jim Hiller, when he had no problem just blankly staring at you and saying, I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
I don't want to talk about that. How different was it switching from Jim Hiller to DJ Smith when it came to those media sessions with the head coach?
I would say generally, and I like both men. They're both super guys, and they were very accommodating. But I would say DJ was a little bit more open to us during those meetings. But I think that it's a trust factor, Jesse. And I think when we pull aside a coach, whether it's Jim or DJ or whomever, most of us that are around, that are the broadcasters, really except for Josh, have been around a long time. And not that they can't trust Josh, But
Sure.
there's a
I
it's a
don't
trust
trust Josh.
factor. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. That's personal. But yeah, he's a great guy. But
Yeah.
they tell us things like sometimes they'll tell us about injuries and things like that, or what they might want to do tactically on the forecheck, and we have to really use it as background for the most part. But I think to answer your question, I think DJ was a little bit more open than Jim. But I've worked with coaches before that they don't want to have these chats with the broadcasters, and they won't give us any extra background. And I don't have any ill will against those people. That's just the way they are. And if you watch the Stanley Cup playoffs now, they give you zero information regarding injuries. We know that.
Yeah.
Even when it's quite apparent, like, for example, Nathan McKinnon got the slap shot on his knee the other night. Well, I guarantee that Jared Bednar is not going to talk about his bruised knee. He's just not going to do it. Even further than that, though, in the playoffs, it gets more secretive. They ask a coach, like, what adjustments might you make after the last game? And they basically won't tell you anything, except for play harder or play our game. Very generic things. So, again, every coach is different. And our job is to pry and to get as much information as we can and relay that to the viewers. I think that's the perspective we have, because we have a special trust that we have with the coaches, and it's our job to relay that information to the fans.
So I don't think you and I have ever talked about this before, but I know I've talked to Jim about it before, and I've talked to other people about it. It's a conversation that kind of fascinates me, and it doesn't really mean anything or have an answer. But the question is, who does the game belong to? And you find yourself in a class of hockey person that I like to pretend that I belong to, which is the owners obviously technically own the teams. I'm using heavy air quotes for people listening to the audio version. The players are the game. The coaches and the GMs, are a weird sort of ever-changing level that, like, somebody could be a GM for 10 years and then never work again. And then the fans are the ones who never change. And I say never in that, like, I know people who have been Kings fans since the 60s. And that's multiple different sets of uniforms, coaches, general managers, players, ownership, building, broadcasters, whatever. Like, all of that changes, but the fan base is in it for the long haul. And if you're in the position that you are, the play-by-play announcer, or you're in a situation like I am where you're trying to communicate to the fans, you have to think like, for example, you talked about, when the glass broke, you have to fill time because your job is to talk to the audience. But you also have to interact with these people and build trust over time. So do you feel like a fan, or do you feel like a liaison to the fans?
Well, I guess probably both. When I announce a game, it's a great thrill. It's like going to a game and watching the game, and I want the Kings to win. I want them to do well and score goals, and I want the fans who are watching the game to enjoy that. You mentioned the word liaison, but that's where we have to use our abilities to get behind the scenes, to talk to the coaches and talk to the players and the GM at times, and ask questions that basically the fan would ask, because the fans want to know, why did you make this trade? Why did you call this player up? Why did you change lines? Or if a player switches sticks or whatever, why are you switching sticks or whatever? So that's our job, is to be a conduit between the hockey people and the fans. So, but at the same time, at the heart of it, Jesse, truly, I am a fan and I love the game. And when the Kings are doing well and winning games and scoring, it's a lot more enjoyable to be a broadcaster than conversely when they're not scoring goals and they're losing hockey games. It's not as fun, no question.
Is there, now I'm just going to pick your brain about a million different things that have now occurred to me. So I'm in a position where I have had specific conversations with management where it's like, listen, you have access, you meaning me, And, so like, let's say I come in to interview Alec Martinez because he's in town and they want me to interview Alec Martinez. So I come in, I go to the studio, I interview Alec Martinez. I can talk about what Alec Martinez talked to me about. But if I'm if I'm in the studio talking to Alec Martinez and I see or hear things that I wouldn't otherwise see or hear outside of my capacity at interviewing Alec Martinez, I have been told, like, that's the limit of what you're allowed to discuss as far as what, as far as things you see and hear given your access. As a broadcaster, you travel on the team plane, you're staying at the hotel, you're around these guys, you're around the team, you have access that ordinary, quote unquote, ordinary people wouldn't necessarily have. Is there any contractual obligation not to reveal, like, let's say Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty got in a fight over who had the cuter Labradoodle. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Like, I know that you personally wouldn't repeat that, but is that just a professional norm, or are there contractual blocks on what a broadcaster is able to talk about that they are exposed to by proximity to the team?
No, I will say definitively there is nothing in my contract that prohibits me from saying anything like that. Obviously, I can't say slanderous things or stuff like that. I mean, let's be honest, but I think it comes down to common sense, Jesse. Mm-hmm. And I've seen things many times on buses or heard things or on charters, especially with players walking down the aisle with an ice bag on their knee. And I would never report that. Again, it's common sense. So, the teams are great about it. They trust us and we trust them. That's what happened in New Jersey years ago, Jesse, when Lou Lamoriello was the general manager, is that on a charter, they used to allow, the Devils did at the time, they allowed the writers on the flights and the broadcasters. And apparently one of the writers saw I don't know if it was a physical fight, but it was a disagreement between two players. And the reporter reported that. And that is why famously, or infamously, if you want to say, Lou Lamoriello barred the media for the rest of his time as the general manager with the Devils and then Islanders and, of course, Toronto. So that journalist that day, and I know for a fact what happened because Marty Brodeur told me the story. He was in St. Louis briefly, as you know, and that's what happened. And the reporter didn't use discretion and he didn't use common sense. And all those broadcasters and media members for years after paid that price, including Mike Emmerich. He was kicked off the charter for the rest of his career as the Devils announcer. Ridiculous.
So one of the things that I try to convey to people, because I never knew these things until I was participating in them, and so now that I am, I try and. Are you a blackjack player at all?
I play blackjack. My favorite game these days is poker, but I've played a lot of blackjack in my life. So
I try and compare a media availability when I talk to fans about it. I try to compare it to a blackjack table where let's say we're talking to DJ Smith at a playoff game. He's the dealer. Everybody there, you, me, Jim, Daryl, Eric Stevens, Zach Dooley, whoever's there to get their stories, Andrew Knoll, whoever it is, we're all sitting at the blackjack table. And we don't know how much time is available to us, right? Because it's up to the person and PR can weigh in. But at some point, this availability will be over. And you want to try and get a good quote, but you don't want to overstep your bounds, upset the person, and end it early. You don't want to be the one who's responsible for the dealer getting a 7-card 21 and sending everybody home miserable. And so I think a lot of times people want that journalist who operates without discretion or common sense. But if they do, they ruin it for everybody. And it becomes this weird kind of game where you're just like, all right, well, I want to ask my question, but I don't want to go too hard. I don't want to be too aggressive. I don't want to touch on things, or for example, like Jim Hiller was a perfect example. I just knew there were some things he wasn't going to talk about. So I just didn't bother asking because you only get so many questions. You only get so much time. And if you ask a question and he spends 45 seconds finding different ways to say, I don't want to talk about it, well, that's 45 seconds gone on the clock for everybody else. And so I don't know. Does that resonate at all, or am I just being crazy?
No, I think that, again, it's common sense, and you sort of have to read the room, Jesse. If a team's on a losing streak, coaches tend to be a little grumpier than when they're on a winning streak, right? I'll just say that generally. And maybe their time isn't going to be as gracious as it would. And if you start asking pointed questions and asking coaches to, play the blame game, most coaches don't like that. But they're all different. Probably the guy that was the easiest to deal with was Ken Hitchcock when he was in St. Louis. I mean, he could fill your notebook for hours. As a matter of fact, I used to do a coaches show in St. Louis every week with Ken Hitchcock, and the show was an hour long and about 40 minutes of content. And so I'd go into his office every week and take 40 minutes of content with Ken Hitchcock. And we would talk, obviously, about what happened in the previous week, the upcoming schedule. Maybe there was some big news around the team, a call-up or a trade. Or we might just go off topic and talk about, what he did as a kid in Edmonton to become a hockey coach, things like that. So he's a reporter's, broadcaster's dream because he'll fill your notebook. Where other coaches, they're very guarded and they don't give you a whole lot. So I think it runs the gamut. But again, I think it comes down to common sense and reading the room and understanding the time and place and situation.
That was one of my favorite things about Todd McClellan is even if he didn't answer the question directly asked, he was likely to talk at great length about whatever he felt like talking about. And you could usually, I always called it the chalk outline. You could usually sort of see the chalk outline in what he said, what he was talking or what he was trying to avoid saying was usually, I felt, kind of clear because he would just talk anyway. He just wouldn't stop time. He'd just be like, okay, I think I get where you're going at that.
Yeah. I think a lot of coaches do come into a press conference, Jesse, and I think they have in their mind a message they want to get out. So regardless of what they're asked, they're going to twist it into the message they want to get out. Probably the best at that ever was Scotty Bowman. I mean, you could ask Scotty about, his power play and it had turned it into, our penalty killing's got to be better or whatever. Like he was the master at not answering your question, but giving you an answer to another question. He was the very best ever at that and still is, quite honestly, because he still does a lot of interviews and podcasts. I
don't know why. So the Tampa Bay Arena, for those who don't know, only has one elevator in the entire building. And it's a freight elevator. And you have to take it
on every floor, by the way.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And you have to take it. If you want to get to the press box, you have to get on a freight elevator where you're just as likely to share it with a giant tub of popcorn as you are with a fellow member of the media or something. So my one game in Tampa, I was first of all, you have to, you have to be given a maze, some map of directions to get to the elevator. And I finally found it, and I'm standing there waiting, and I'm standing there, and a person turns the corner, and it took me half a second to realize it was Scotty Bowman. And I've never been more just silently terrified. I mean, I don't know why I was terrified. It's not like he's going to hurt me or anything, but I was just I just didn't want to say anything stupid because it was Scotty Bowman, and I wound up sharing an elevator with Scotty Bowman. So you mentioned, you've been in the game for a long time. There was a tweet a week ago, maybe, and it was, I don't know who the gentleman is that tweeted it, but he has a very large following. I think he's an NBA person. And he said, I love watching hockey, but it would be so much better and it would get the attention it so obviously wants if it were easier to tell when somebody scores. And that kicked off this big conversation about, the glow puck and HD, changes over the years. And I've watched highlights of games that in my mind are crystal clear, but I watch the highlights and I go, oh man, I can't believe the coverage was so fuzzy in 2001, right? I can't believe that the TV cameras were so bad compared to what we have now. Has it made your job easier that the technological advancements have been so impressive?
Well, as far as calling the game, and a lot of people ask me this question, if I watch the game on the monitor or watch it, just live, looking down on the ice? And my answer is, when the game's going on, I never look at the monitor.
Right.
I want to have a bigger perspective, because I think the biggest key to following the puck is you have to have an innate ability to know where the puck's going to probably go. So you have to know the game. So, for example, if a team dumps the puck into the far corner and the right wing gets it first, and you have two forwards going to the net, well, you can pretty well guess that the puck's going to be centered by that right winger. So you can anticipate, the player is going to the net. That's just a small example. So, that's what I do, is I watch it live. And then the second there's a whistle, I'll turn and look at my monitor to see what the fans are seeing at home. Because if they go to a quick shot of the Kings coach, then it doesn't make much sense for us to talk about the other team's coach. We're looking at the Kings coach.
Right,
and basically I shut up. Jesse, I let Jim Fox take over at that point. But, and I think that hockey is there's no question for the fans, with the advent of HD and more cameras, and you have the robo cameras, the in-goal cameras are awesome. To follow the game, to understand the game is 10 times easier and better than it was 20 years ago and even 40 years ago. I mean, when my dad was announcing games in St. Louis in the 70s, not many games were on TV, of course, at that time, but the games that were, my guess is, Jesse, they had 4 cameras covering the game. I mean, very limited cameras, not great camera positions, certainly well before HD was invented. So you want to talk about having a hard time following a hockey game? Try to go back and watch a game from the 70s compared to a game now. It's just night and day. No question.
Honestly, the most bizarre thing to me that I never thought about until very recently, the most important technological advancement in TV broadcasting is the score bug. I was watching a highlight of a game from not that long ago, and I didn't know what the score was. And I was scrolling through the full game just trying to find a specific goal, and I couldn't find it because there was no clock on the screen and there was no score on the screen. I had no idea how much time there was. I was like in the middle of the second period, and I had to wait for somebody to say 8 minutes left in the second. I was like, oh my God, like, it's such a simple, genius addition to the entire thing. You talk about cameras and advancements. One area where I'm not sure it has helped is goaltender interference. So I'm just going to ask you point blank. Do you understand what goaltender interference is right now? Because I don't. I never know. I think I know how any given call is going to go, but there was one, I can't remember if it was the playoffs or very near the playoffs. I think it was Ottawa, where it was so obviously goaltender interference and it didn't count, or it wasn't called back. And I mean, that's one of the popular complaints in fandom right now, is that goaltender interference is just out of control.
Well, they're trying to get it right, and all sports are adding more instant replay, as you know. I think the biggest thing with goaltender interference is that it's subjective. Mm-hmm. But I would just say generally for, the fans that are watching games or, listening to this podcast right now, is that generally I would say look at for a couple of things. Was the player in the goal crease or was he out of the goal crease? That's number one. And who initiated the contact is number two. And I guess number three would be, how physical was how bad was the contact? So if you look at those three things, you can probably generally guess, the way the call is going to go. But again, because it's subjective, sometimes maybe there's minimal contact in the goal crease. And the referee determines, and the war room in Toronto determines that the goaltender did have an ability to do his job and play the puck and all that. So I think that's the gray area, is when there's, minimal contact and you're not really sure if it, affected the goaltender or not. But again, they're trying to get it right. And they can't get it right 100% of the time, but that's what they're doing. And I think it's going to be a hot button issue for probably as long as it's in the rule book, quite honestly, because again, when you see it, and if you're a fan, you're going to always think that your team's right. But that's
Well,
not always the case.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's subjective
no.
and it's gray area. So, as opposed to, was the puck in the net? Well, it either isn't or isn't, or was the play offside? It's black and white. But goaltender interference is gray, so that's why it's a little bit controversial.
Final question to let you out on here, and I promised my dad that I would ask you this. Living in Ottawa, did you ever eat at Nate's?
Well, the answer is no. I've never heard of Nate's.
Okay.
But I will tell you that I moved away from Ottawa when I was 8 years old. So I don't remember much from 1968 and before that. So
then this one is just for me. Big fan of beaver tails at all?
Oh yes, they're awesome.
I attacked Elliot Friedman and Kyle Bukowskis about this. I think beaver tails are one of the most overrated things I've ever had in my life.
Well, if fans don't know what they are, Jesse, they're basically like a giant. It's like a giant cinnamon roll, right? Yeah. And I love cinnamon, so I love beaver tails. I really do.
I mean, they're fine. I got no problem with them. But I mean, the way my family talks about them, you'd think they were the greatest thing ever. And then I go and we're on the Rideau Canal and it's cold and they're like, "Oh yeah, beaver tail." Right. I'm like, "All right, it's
right." Well, it's probably like poutine. It's like an acquired taste for Canadian. I
guess.
If you know what poutine is, I'm sure you do, right?
Yeah.
It's basically a heart attack in a box. French fries.
Yeah, but I mean, there's good poutine and bad poutine.
Absolutely. Yes.
And beaver tails are just a bunch of dough with sugar and cinnamon on them. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think it's good. But...
Yeah. John Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate it. And we'll see you back at the rink.
Okay, Jesse. Thanks for having me. Have a great summer.